We've just been hearing today matriculants in the basic education department say they are ready tomorrow in various parts of the country to start writing that English Paper 1 exam. So far, they've covered 2 practicals, including computer application technology. But it's not everyone who is usually able to cope with the stress of the exam period. Some of these teenagers are dealing with anxiety and stress, which can be exacerbated by the level of social challenges and expectations from not just the parents, but educators as well. We've been hearing this morning from the Basic Education Minister, who's appealed to teachers, parents and broader society to support grade 12 pupils. Let's speak about how to get through this process or this period in the best way possible with the educational psychologist Vanessa Barns. Vanessa, a very good afternoon to you. Good morning, excuse me. Welcome to Newzroom AM. The Basic Education Ministers are saying today, appealing after talking about the technical aspects for everyone to do their best to support this cohort. How do we do that in the best way possible?
Yeah, so she raises a very valid point there in terms of them having to write exams for the first time, in person in quite a few years. And I think there's 2 things we've got to focus on. We've got to focus on how we guide them before the exams in terms of preparing for it, and on the day of the exam and writing the actual exam. And actually even a 3rd thing, preparing them for the future and receiving their results as well. So if you had to look at the day of the exam, for example, make sure that you get to the exam venue early, that you're on time, you're not stressed about sitting in traffic and that kind of thing. One thing I always say to people who are anxious about writing exams or tests is don't speak to your peers about the exam prior to it or after it, because often we have this habit of standing together and going, oh, what did you write for this answer and what did you say? And then we start to doubt ourselves because we think maybe we're wrong and the other person is right, and that creates a lot of anxiety. So in terms of on the day, if you want me to, I can run through a couple of tips of things that they can do during the exam.
So I'll get to on the day itself in a moment, but these 24 hours, today is basically the day before the official start, right? What is the best way to do? Is it, I know there's a difference in opinion, for example, on how much time should be spent actually studying and revising work the night before?
Okay, so definitely, first thing, focus on what you do know, not what you think you don't know. So you know a lot more than you think you do, so that's the first thing I'm going to say. Definitely get enough sleep tonight, even though you're anxious, and I know it's going to be difficult to try and fall asleep, get sleep. We do know, it's been scientifically proven, that the brain needs sleep in order to convert things that we have learned from our short-term memory into our long-term memory. There is controversy, you're right, in terms of how much you study and that kind of thing. Again, it has been scientifically proven that we do need to take brain breaks. That's what they call them. So you do need to take a break from your studying. The thing is, and the catch there is that when you take that break, stay off of a screen. Don't go onto your cell phone and check social media or that kind of thing, because the screen activates the same part of the brain that is involved in learning. So you're not actually having a break if you're going to have that screen time. Rather go get some fresh air, drink a glass of water, go to the bathroom. And also just avoid today, especially drinking too much caffeine. I think the temptation is there when the energy levels are low. And we know that that can increase anxiety levels as well.
Okay. So exams then start tomorrow. In my day, it was around 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. when you'd sit for the first paper. You mentioned earlier not talking to classmates or friends about what one has studied or not, even after the exam itself. What else should they be doing?
Okay, so like I said, definitely get there early, because that does alleviate the anxiety of possibly being late as well. When you're writing your papers, read through your questions first, carefully and slowly, take your time, but also keep an eye on the time as well. So as you're writing, if you realize you're running out of time, then focus on the questions that you know. Focus on the questions that you know you can answer and that you can contribute a lot to, and then afterwards come back to the ones that you weren't sort of 100% certain about. Don't compare yourself to others around you as you look around that examination room. If you see others are finishing early or whatever the case is.
Some are getting extra paper and you're wondering what they need extra paper for.
100%. So try keep your focus on what's happening in front of you. One of the biggest things I always teach people to do is to ground yourself. It's a very simple technique. And what you do there is you put both feet flat on the floor. And instead of kind of feeling gravity pulling you down, you almost want to feel the floor pushing up against your feet. And what you're doing there is you're just taking yourself back into the body, away from the part of the brain that is activated when you're anxious. And it just gives you that moment to refocus your attention.
What about the external factors? I mean, it's one thing to avoid classmates and friends on the morning of the exam or tell them that you don't want to go into a rehash of what's been studied. But parents play a huge role in putting pressure on grade 12 pupils. And tonight will be the night when many of those questions come up about how much have you studied? How much do you think you're going to get when the final mark is in?
100%. And I think what we can do here is appeal to the parents to be sensitive to that and to not put that kind of pressure on the learners. And to realize that, yes, these are the biggest exams that you've ever written in your life, but it's not the end of the world. There are options for next year if something goes wrong. There are rewrites. There are bridging courses that you can do. So I think to take that pressure off yourself that this is the be-all and the end-all, and we can only appeal to parents to rather just encourage and say to them, listen, you've done everything you can do, you know a lot, you need to get a good night's sleep. So parents just to encourage the children rather than put that pressure on them
but also,
tonight.
Vanessa, what about realistic expectations? I mean, if your child has not been an 80% student from grade 1 all the way to matric or even since high school, there is an element of an unrealistic expectation, is there not, to now say to them that if you usually average around 60, you must get 80, 85, 90.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's unrealistic. It's not impossible, but it's not likely. So I think placing that level of expectation on your child it's unfair. So, like I say, the focus needs to be rather on just do your best. As long as you do your best, that's what I'm proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And for the children, if they're feeling that level of expectation, just realizing that there are options for next year. If they don't get that 80 that the parents are expecting and they can't get into whatever degree they may have wanted to get into, there are ways around that. There are ways of doing bridging courses and catching up those marks.
Vanessa Barns, a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. By the way, we're making our way, thank you, Vanessa, we're making our way to 11:30.